Yo guys, Vision SGN here, bringing you more Marvel Rivals content. In today's video, I'll be bringing you my new top 3 series where I'll be breaking down each category of heroes into smaller subcategories, where I'll rank each role and playstyle of all of the heroes in the game right now, explaining the reasons why each character makes it into this list. But I also want to address the purpose of this series, as I think it's important that players understand there's more than just 3 basic categories of players and playstyles right now, and not just the basic Vanguard, Duelist, and Strategist playstyles. So, on that note, let's get right into it. Now, as for the first series and subcategory of heroes I want to address and both rank, I thought it'd be fitting to start with the damage blocking heroes, the ones with unreal sustain, and seeing as I myself am a tank main, and this is mainly what I do and play in competitive for the most part, unless of course the team needs me to change it up, which I'm always down and up for the challenge. However, just before I explain this list and begin ranking my top 3, I just wanted to further address what I meant about subcategories of heroes and why I think this series will be great at providing more detail for each hero and what category they fall into for newer players and maybe even the experienced players, but also what subcategories they're best fit for. So, for example, duelists, right? There are 20 known duelists in the game currently. But if I was to ask you, or you were to ask yourself, who are your top 3 or the best 3 duelists in the game right now, you wouldn't be able to tell me based on a set criteria. I mean, are we talking about the best range duelists, the best damage per second DPS duelists? Are we talking about the best flying or aerial duelists? See, that's where I thought this series would come into play and benefit both new players and experienced players, because there are so many different play styles and strengths and weaknesses for each hero in this game. Even the tanks, for example, there are brawling style tanks and diving tanks and also slow shielding tanks. So this is where I'll start the series, and I'll begin with the damage blocking sustainable tanks. So on that note, coming in at number 3 on this list for most sustainable and damage blocking characters in the game, who is quite literally impossible to kill when they're played right, is Venom. Now, if you begin to master Venom's abilities, learning when to use them and how to stay alive, that's where you'll really develop and become one of the best damage blocking characters in the game. I've been in certain situations before on the objective where either my teammate Venom or the other Venom on the other team will be the last man standing and completely deal with multiple players trying to remove him off the objective, but can't because his stay alive ability, his sustain, is so good and almost unparalleled to other characters. Of course, he is then balanced off by then reducing the amount of damage he can do to multiple targets, which of course is why he's not overpowered as such. Overall, Venom's quite a simple character to learn, I would say. The difficult part is how you stay alive and mastering that element, as he's a very valuable character to have on your team if you can just constantly apply pressure to the other team's support players. And of course, learning how to use the abilities and when is what will separate you and create more value for your team. But I won't go over it in a full detailed guide, as I'm creating a separate series for each of the characters in the game right now. But for this video, I'll briefly touch on exactly how you want to use Venom. So as you can see here in the practice range, I'm not currently able to do any damage standing at the 15-meter mark. So bear that in mind, as Venom will want to be played in the medium to close range areas. So up to 12 meters away, you can actually deal damage using his symbiote primary attack, which is surprisingly very powerful if you can land consistent critical shots, as that's where you'll do the most amount of damage and you'll be able to eliminate other squishier players quite easily. So just bear that in mind. And when paired with the cellular corrosion ability, where he unleashes a tentacle to slow enemies within his reach, and any enemy in that area that's unable to break free in time will then suffer damage from this ability. So you want to almost stay close to the enemy after you attach to them, especially dealing critical combined with that. And then, of course, Venom has that cool Touch of Clintar team-up ability, where he shares a part of his symbiote abilities with both Spider-Man and Penny, and they can then deal damage using the explosive spikes and also be sustainable and not take any damage. So that's definitely worth considering if you're going to have the two paired up. And then, of course, as I mentioned, Venom can swing around using his L1 ability, and then combined with Frenzied Arrival, where he effectively dashes into the ground, dealing damage and launching enemies up into the sky. This is effectively how you want to approach situations, but of course, you then want to save your swing to get back out when needed, because if you get overwhelmed, you'll then probably die. So mastering this is key to surviving as a Venom main, and effectively that's the main and most important part of Venom, learning how to dive in and out of situations, keeping yourself alive, but also pressuring the enemy backline. When you combine it with his R1 ability, his symbiotic resilience, that's where he becomes really powerful and almost unkillable. So basically what you want to do is you swing into situations, dive into the ground to launch enemies up, use his R1 ability to stay alive for as long as possible, whilst obviously then using his R2, his primary attack, to deal critical damage, and then when needed, you then swing out of danger back to your main team to support them, and you just repeat this cycle over and over again. That's why he's basically the best diving character, because his base health is really high, his ability to get in and out of danger is really good and effective, and overall it's what makes him a top 3 damage blocker and sustainable character. Not even to mention his ultimate ability, where he's effectively one of the best crowd control characters, allowing him to deal more damage to enemies, launching them all up into the sky, stunning them, and it almost makes players forget where they are or where everyone else is. So this is definitely a great character you want to be trying out if you're trying to control situations, damage block, and stay alive for as long as possible. And if your team needs more of this, definitely consider pairing him with the likes of Spider-Man or Penny Parker. As for number 2 on this list, as one of the best damage blocking and sustainable heroes in the game, has to be Magneto, who is one of my personal favorites in both the game and in the comics. Love the character. He is an expert at damage mitigation, whilst also great at dealing damage using his Iron Volley primary attack and his Mag Cannon. These two allow him to be really good at sniping other players and just constantly aggravating those backline supports. And considering Magneto is not a damage dealing character, he's a primary damage blocker, a main tank, it's good to know that he can deal damage to his backline players, as he deals higher splash damage to players that are at a greater distance than him, which is great to consider and have in the back of your mind when you're playing alongside another tank, where you have more freedom to press higher and pressure the backline. And to be honest, that's what I kind of do for the most part when playing alongside other tanks, as I find Magneto is quite good at sniping other characters if you can hit your shots, which then allows the healers to be separated from their tanks, and then allows your team to then isolate other players and so on, and that's kind of how it works. However, Magneto is a primary tank, as I mentioned, someone that needs to be shielding for his team using his metallic curtain, which temporarily places a shield down in front of your teammate, which blocks all incoming projectile damage for up to 2 seconds, and then you can also place your metal bulwark ability by pressing R1 on a teammate, allows you to shield them for a short period of time, and any damage they receive in that time will then feed your L1 ability, your Mag Cannon, so you can deal more damage. You can then of course use your Iron Bulwark ability, your circle, to shield yourself instead of your teammates, and that way you can either push out other players and keep yourself protected, or save it in your back pocket for worst case scenarios where you then need to get yourself back and retreat to your team for healing, which is what makes him a very sustainable and effective damage blocker, as he can continuously pull up that metallic curtain, blocking all incoming damage every 3 seconds, and then of course continuously keep putting either a shield on himself or his team, and with a base health of 650, makes him so hard to deal with. Even as a Magneto main myself, whenever I swap out to a duelist and try and deal with this character, I forget how hard he is to actually isolate and remove off the map, so definitely top 2 in this list for best damage blockers. However, as for the number 1 and best damage blocking character in the game right now, has to be Doctor Strange without a doubt. He is my personal favourite. I probably spent the most amount of time on this hero, and I've got into Lord Stairs first, which I was really happy with. But with his Shield of Seraphim, which is a 800 hit point shield, which blocks an insane amount of damage, and his high base health, which was nerfed from 650 to 600 after this video, he is a great character to be using, and probably the best Vanguard to be using in the game right now. As I mentioned, the number 1 damage blocker, but also with his ability to fly, I find it really easy to pressure those aerial and support characters who other tanks struggle to deal with. And for me, I've just mastered that element of being able to deal with an Iron Man who no longer bothers me. Whereas when I'm Magneto or any other tank for that part, I can't seem to get those annoying, pesty characters who are so evasive. And not to mention Doctor Strange's ultimate ability, which is super powerful, and when timed right, you can quite literally stun the entire team, which allows you to survive for that much longer. And when you can combine your melee attack, your primary attack, and your Maelstrom of Madness attack, you can wipe out the entire team. And that's why Doctor Strange comes in at number 1 as the best damage blocking and sustainable character in the game. Now, just before I quickly wrap up this video, I wanted to give a quick shout out, as I do in all of my videos, to another character who almost belongs in this top 3. Even though he's a duelist character, he is by far one of the most effective and damage blocking characters in the game, with significant sustain, largely due to his reflexive rubber ability. By pressing R1 allows him to absorb an insane amount of damage, and then he can then deflect it back out to enemies in the direction you're facing. Of course, when paired with his other abilities, where he effectively gains armor the more damage he deals, and then becomes a lot stronger, makes him really hard to kill, and is a very sustainable character. I've seen this guy just jump into the action against my entire team, last man on the point, and become very, very difficult for any player to deal with. So definitely worth mentioning for this list. 100% I would recommend trying this character out if you need a one-man tank setup and then you want to sort of pair this guy with Invisible Woman. It makes it really good for a team to have this character. And that's pretty much it for the best damage blockers and sustainable heroes in the game right now in Season 1. If you think there's players that I didn't mention in this video, please let me know down below. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. And if there's any tips and tricks that you've learned along the way for damage blocking as a main, let us know as well. I'm Vision SGN. I'll see you in the next one.